Alright, here is the next example. So again, end behavior, the first thing we're going to look for, you're looking at that first term. And what we notice about it, excuse me, is the exponent is even, and the number is positive. So the nice thing about even is that they're going to go the same direction. So this tells me that it's going to rise in both directions, because positive is going to go up. So rise to the left and rise to the right. Then we look at the x-intercepts, which is really just setting it equal to 0. So it's going to be 0 is equal to x to the 4th minus 4x squared plus 4. In order to solve this one, we're going to have to use the u method, since it looks like it's a quadratic, but it's not quite. We're going to use the u method. U is going to equal x squared. And I'm going to do, this is u squared minus 4u plus 4. And then if I factor that apart, that's going to factor to, u, let's see, 4 and negative 4 is going to be negative 2 and negative 2. So it's u minus 2 times u minus 2. And since there's two of those, I really only have to set one equal to 0. I'm going to get u is equal to positive 2. I set that equal to 0, but that's really going to happen twice, so we got to keep that in mind. And remember, the last step here is to really put the x squared back in, because that's what we got to solve for. And we're going to take the square root. And we get x is equal to, I would make that a decimal, plus or minus 1.41. So that 1.41, since it came from 2 of the u minus 2's, is going to have a multiplicity of 2. So 1.41 has a multi of 2. So it's going to bounce. And negative 1.41 also has a multiplicity of 2. So it's also going to bounce. So those are our zeros, and that's saying what they're going to do. Alright, next step is the y-intercept. To find the y-intercept, we're going to plug 0 in for all the x's. So it's going to be 0 to the 4th minus 4 times 0 squared plus 4, which is really just 4. For the symmetry, we're going to plug in negative x. Excuse me, guys. So it's going to be negative x to the 4th minus 4 times negative x squared plus 4. Negative x to the 4th is just going to turn out as x to the 4th. It's even, so it becomes positive. Minus negative x squared is also just going to stay x squared plus 4. So if you notice, those are the same. And if you think back to what we learned last chapter, same is even. And what this tells us for these problems, even tells us it's symmetric with the y-axis. So that's our symmetry. The symmetry is with the y-axis. And then the last one is the number of turns. That we're just taking the highest exponent, which for this one was a 4, minus 1. Max of 3 turns when we go to graph it. So that's how you find everything. So then how do you graph it? So if you remember what I said, the first thing you should be graphing is all the intercepts. So these, we have those decimal intercepts. And that's why I made them a decimal, is because it's easier to graph them when they're a decimal. So we're at negative 1.41 and positive 1.41. And then our y-intercept was at 4. And then to draw this graph right now, we have to think of all the things that our problem has told us about this curve. Specifically, first focusing in on that first thing we found. That's going to rise on both sides, so that means I'm going to start in the up position, left of that first intercept. So I always start left of the first intercept, and I know I'm going to start up. I'm going to go down to it, and it's supposed to bounce off of this one. So we're going to bounce, but we got to go through this point, or curve back. We got to bounce off that point and keep going up. The other thing that you should really notice about this graph is that symmetry that we had talked about is something we want to watch for. So we want to try and keep it the same kind of spacing on either side here. So I might even say that this needs to curve out a little bit more just to make it look a little bit more even. You're trying to make it match. You're trying to make it look symmetric over that line. Okay? Let's try one more. I'm going to actually skip 3. I posted that already on Schoology. We're going to look at number 4. Alright, so what's weird with number 4 is it's actually already in factored form, which is going to make some parts of this really easy and other parts of it a little bit more difficult. So the end behavior, what we really have to think about is if we put all of this stuff together, what the first coefficient would look like if we actually multiplied it out. So just be careful, this squared would eventually get to that x, so it's really going to be -2 times x squared times that other x squared. So your leading coefficient would be -2x to the 4th. So that means we have an exponent that's even, and we have a number that's negative, which means even, I like even ones, they're going to go the same direction. Negative means it's going to go down, so it's going to fall. Falls to the left and falls to the right. X-intercepts, we're going to set this guy equal to 0. This is the one that's going to be easiest because it's already pretty much set up for us. We can just set the parts equal to 0. So this one is going to give me an answer of x equals 4. So one of our answers is going to be 4 with a multiplicity of 2 because of that squared, which means it's going to bounce. And the other one here, if I set this equal to 0, that's x squared equals 1, take the square root, get x equals plus or minus 1. And for those, 4 doesn't look very pretty here. For those are individual answers, so those have a multiplicity of 1. So it's going to be 1 with a multiplicity of 1, and that's an odd multiplicity, so it crosses. -1 with a multiplicity of 1, also an odd multiplicity, so it crosses. Y-intercept, we have to plug in 0 for x. This one also is a little bit more complicated because we got to evaluate all this stuff, but it's not too bad. It's -2 times -4 squared times -1, which is -2 times 16 times -1, which, since now we have 2 negatives, is really just going to turn into positive 32. That's your y-intercept. Now we're going to look at the symmetry for this one, and it gets a little weird. For the symmetry, remember you're plugging in -x. So if I put -x into that first position, and then it's -x squared minus 1. So, excuse me, I'm going to ignore that one for a little bit. This is the weird one right here. This part's going to be a little weird for us. This one actually is going to just turn into -x squared. So far, nothing's changed. But for that one, you kind of have to imagine if you FOILed it out what would happen. And this would become positive x squared. Then when you do -x times -4, it's positive 4x times 2 would be plus 8x. And then -4 squared is plus 16. So that's what that's going to turn into. And if we look back at the original here, if I would have FOILed this one out, that's going to be x squared. It's going to be minus 8x plus 16. So because of the way that one is formulated, that one didn't change, or did change, and everything else didn't change. So this is a neither. And neither tells us that there's no symmetry. And the last one is our number of turns. The highest exponent, if you remember when we put that front term together, it was to the 4th power. So that's our highest exponent right now. So it's going to be 4 minus 1. We're going to probably see it turn 3 times. This doesn't actually guarantee that's how many times it's going to turn, but it gives you the max. 3 turns max is what we can have. So now let's try to graph everything. So to graph it, again, the first step of graphing is to graph the intercepts. So we're going to go to +4 and +1 and -1. Those are all the intercepts for the x-axis. And then the y1 is 32. So what we did in class with this is we decided, since there's 10 spots going up, that the best thing to get to 32 would be to go by 4. So we went by 4. So this is 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32 would be up here. So you can label that a little bit. Leave the x-axis alone, but you can scale the y-axis to get this all to fit. And then we look back out here at everything we know. We don't have any symmetry, so we don't have to worry about that. We know we can only turn a maximum of 3 times. And we know that we're going to fall on the left and fall on the right. So that tells me on the left side of that first intercept, I'm going to start left. And then what we got to watch for is whether we're crossing or bouncing. The one to watch out for is this guy right here at 4. We got to bounce there. So we just got to make sure that that one's a bounce point. So again, we're going to start in the negative position down here. This one we cross, go through that y-intercept. This one we cross, come back around. That one we're supposed to bounce on. So we're going to go through here. I almost didn't bounce. This one we're going to bounce, and then it's going to keep going down. So we fall on both sides there, because that's what that first step said, is that we're supposed to fall because it was negative and even. Alright, hopefully this makes sense, and we will reconvene tomorrow.